Hello, friends, and welcome to the Culture Books Podcast, episode 14. My name is John. I'm joined in the pod by Sheridan.
Hey!
And it is the 11th of August, 2022. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been quite heartening how people, as this podcast has gone on, keep starting with the Prelude episode and working their way through. We do apologise for our tardy schedule caused by... Let's not get into that now. But our tardy schedule, we do apologise for. But hey, we've all made it to the end, and people starting the Prelude now will never know how slack we've been at various times.
I was in Fiji.
That's true, but I was not even assigning blame, was I? Sheridan wants everyone to know she's just come back from a holiday in Fiji, though, so that's nice. Okay, we are at the end of the line for this book, but we will be starting the Player of Games in roughly our normal schedule, so a few weeks' time probably.
Whenever we get around to it.
But, okay, what do we do at this point in the podcast, Sheridan?
At this point in the podcast, you have 30 seconds to recap the entire book thus far.
Let's go. Count me in. 3, 2, 1, go. There's a war in space. It's between some giant lizards and a bunch of computers that keep humans as pets. The computers have lost one of their own. The lizards want to get it to steal their technology. And the race is on between various factions. And they end up on this dead world ruled by a mad god. And there's a huge firefight between all the factions chasing for the mind. And almost everyone dies.
Good work.
Okay, now Sheridan, this is going to be tricky for you.
Yep.
Because there's not a lot of words, but there's a lot of info in this chapter.
There is a lot of info.
But almost no words.
How many pages is
it's
it?
Like 10 pages, you know.
I thought it was like 15, 20.
It's very dense storytelling, shall we say.
I'm doing both the postscript and the appendices, yeah?
So chapter 14, consider Phlebas.
Yeah.
The appendices, the postscripts.
All of it, yeah.
Everything until the preview for the next book.
Yep.
Yeah.
I didn't get the preview for the next book.
Okay, there you go. All right. So, hey, folks, if you haven't read all the way to the very end of the book, then just pause now and go do that. But we figure you're up with this. Okay, Sheridan, your time starts in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Horza is dead. Talking to you about that later. And then we do a what's happened to everyone section before... Oh, actually, there's some sort of endearing stuff about why they entered the war, which is like a bit boring, but then what happened to everyone. So Belveda freezes herself for 400 years. The culture seems to really split up on whether that war is okay. Then she kills herself. Unaha Kloss is a surprising bootlick. Oh, man.
Okay, quickly.
Unaha Kloss is a bootlicker.
Was he a bootlicker? He just makes little steam trains.
He joins the culture.
Why wouldn't he? He's a machine intelligence.
Thal Negestra, she, rises through the ranks, unsurprisingly.
I mean, she was already on the war council.
Yeah.
She didn't have far to rise.
She keeps going.
She has a very exciting life, though.
She does. All the changes are wiped out. The mind takes Horza's name, but continues with his little culture escapades, and then meets Belveda's great niece, and tells her the story.
Yes. Okay. All right, let's start working through that, because obviously the name I think we'll save until the very end.
All right, now we have to talk about what happened last episode, where I was made out to be a moron for not knowing that Horza was dead, but... As my friend whose name's escaping me on Facebook mentioned...
No, that was on YouTube. We had the comment.
Oh, YouTube, sorry.
Saying they couldn't wait to hear you have your revenge.
Thank you, friend. Because that revenge is happening right now. Because John and I, despite living in a common law marriage, have not discussed... I've been out of the country, so that explains a little bit. But you... basically spoiled the ending for me and then made me feel like an idiot.
Okay, so...
There's literally a whole another chapter making you wonder whether he's dead.
is mortally wounded and speaks his last words and performs no further actions in the narrative.
In that chapter, but see, I don't know the next chapter.
Well, honestly...
How do I know Belvader's not getting him back to the ship and getting a med kit or doing some crazy...
Yeah, but she doesn't, does she?
No, but I didn't know that. And I was correct.
Okay, he breathed his final words, though, in the previous chapter.
He did,
yes.
But to an average reader, they're wondering,
and
maybe
he was
he'll
in a
come
coma
out.
from there on in.
Maybe he'll come out of it.
I apologise for that. I honestly didn't know that he actually didn't cease to have a pulse until the end of chapter 14.
She's literally rushing to save him. She's rushing past dead bodies. No, I'm going to try, Horsa. Although a bit of that might have been because she was worried she couldn't get into the ship without using it. But anyway, I feel slighted. But we will continue.
Okay. I did like this bit when he's on the stretcher and she's trying to get him to the ship, and where it says, the face of the man on the stretcher was white as the snow and as blank. The features were there, eyes, nose, brows, mouth, but they seemed somehow unlinked and disconnected, giving a look of anonymity to a face lacking all character, animation and depth. It was as though all the people, all the characterizations, all the parts the man had played in his life had leaked out of him in his coma and taken their own little share of his real self with them, leaving him empty, wiped, clean. I
had that section highlighted too.
Oh, did you? Okay.
So, like, if you've seen someone die, I mean, when I read that initially, I got a bit teary actually. But it's because he's a but then when I reread it, I was like, oh, that's because he's a changer. So he doesn't really have. But that is kind of what happens when someone dies. Yeah,
but there's also it's definitely because he's a changer. It's more pronounced, but also all the stuff with him struggling with his own maintaining a sense of identity. In various chapters.
Yeah.
Because, a part of his taking on the appearance of people was to also fix their character in his mind. So he was always a bit disconnected from himself.
Yeah.
And all that goes in the end. And then, as you note, like 2 pages later, his pulse ceases and he is absolutely gone. And we know that Belvader's got the mind, and that's it. Now, what did you think at the start of the appendices? Did you notice the little Easter egg in there?
A short history of... Oh, edited... What am I looking at?
Yeah, so these passages have been extracted from a short history of the Aduran War, English language Christian calendar version.
Oh, actually, I didn't notice that, but later in the chapter I noticed AD, and I was like... It didn't seem long enough away.
Yeah, and noting that it says original text AD 2110, so that this is a book that's been written in our year 2110 for humans.
Right.
Okay, and it's saying in the Contact Approved Earth Extra Information Pack. So it's telling us that at some point in our future, Contact is going to start dealing with us here on Earth. And that this stuff's in a book that they've given the humans to try and bring them up on, galactic history.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. And that's quite important for a lot of future continuity stuff. And again, the people who, I know many of them listen to this show, but who are wrong, who say that the books don't matter in the order that they're written in, generally haven't read Consider Phlebas, so they're just wandering around blind, not realising that the narrative has actually got more structure than they think it does.
Why haven't they read Considered Phlebas?
Well, because there's a bunch of books, they haven't read all of them, just read some of them.
Oh, because there's no order to them.
Well, they think there's no order to them. But there is, and it all starts here.
Were they actually released in this order?
We're reading it in the order of release, yes. Okay. It gets a little complicated with use of weapons because it was started before any of it, but it wasn't released until later. But we're not getting to that until after Player of Games.
How many of these things are there?
More than 10, I think.
Oh, God.
Yeah, we're going to be
Oh, wow, I did not know I was committing to this. This is fair. I was misled.
Look, you can always bail after you finish.
I wonder how many more spoilers I'll get.
Well, I haven't read Player of Games in 30 years, so...
When did you read this one last?
Probably 15 years ago.
Right. Yeah. You read it when you were 17?
20.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe 25 years. Anyway, it was a long time ago since I read Player of Games, so if I've got any spoilers for that, I'll be very surprised.
Is it not as good?
Look, we'll get to it.
I'm just worried because you haven't reread it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there'll be a lot in it, because generally, through most of my adult life, Ian M. Banks has had another book out every year or two, so you just read the new one. But now he's gone, so we have to read the old stuff again.
Right. So how long of a period did he write these books over?
Like 30 years.
So he was pumping out one every 3 years.
That sort of thing, yeah. Sometimes more. And also the other stuff written is Ian Banks, not Ian M. Banks.
Does his technology advance in that time? I mean, there's a massive change in...
Yeah, the worldview definitely changes as well, which we'll get more of. But speaking of worldview, let's dive into reasons why the culture fought the war. What did you think of this?
Well, the opening paragraph kind of says it all.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then they talk about peace is their most precious quality.
Their own peace of mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're happy to wage galactic war.
Yeah, so that they can just prance around.
Feeling good about themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why I initially thought they were douchebags.
Yeah. And, as well, it does cover that significant chunks of the culture kept breaking away as they on this march to war, saying we're not going to be part of this.
Yeah.
And, we'll meet their descendants in future books with claiming to be, we're the true culture, you're the ones who betrayed our values by fighting a war. So this is hotly contended stuff, and anyone who's spent any time in left-wing politics will be well aware of the dynamics being discussed there.
I think it probably happens in right-wing politics too, but...
they tend to stick together more. They don't like splitters as much. And also uniformity is more part of what they're about. Okay, I did like the line about the concept of money. The very concept of money, regarded by the culture as a crude, overcomplicated, and inefficient form of rationing, was irrelevant within the society itself, where the capacity of its means of production ubiquitously and comprehensively exceeded every reasonable, and in some cases perhaps unreasonable, demand its not unimaginative citizens could make. Which is a beautiful way of saying we've got billions of these people all thinking up exciting ways to... use resources, but, once you've got access to the stars, you can just do anything.
Whatever you want.
Yeah. Although, you do note that most have considered Phlebas were meeting, lower tech civilizations where people are still hard scrapping to make a living.
Yes, true.
Anyway, and then the stuff about the urge to not feel useless and the catchphrase, the technology of compassion, which sounds... There's always a criticism of these books that America's best view of itself had a lot to do with Ian M. Banks's view of initial thought of what the culture was. We're going to intervene in these countries and improve their world, but it almost never actually improves things.
So you're saying Banks is saying the culture's like Americans?
That's been certainly in the early books, particularly before the Gulf War, which really changed his view on what the Americans were up to. He had a more positive view of American interventionism.
Even after Vietnam?
We definitely acknowledged that was not a good part.
Right.
But also, remember the world at this point in the 80s was, still had things like the Balkan Wars, with the fall of, the collapse of Yugoslavia in the future. And there was still this idea that maybe, and the whole...
The USSR still together.
Yeah, the Cold War confrontation was all about, maybe, do we let the communists just roll their tanks into these countries, or do we do something to stop them? So these questions are being ventilated here. I would say that, the culture is in every way a far more benign and benevolent civilization than American imperialism.
Yeah.
But it still, raises the same doubts as, are you actually justified in intervening, and where are you justified in intervening?
Which it seems like when we get to Belvader's story, a lot of them start to question.
Or even the mind's choice of name, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, but it's an interesting argument that fundamentally the culture was actually more threatened than the Adurans were, because if they chose not to do anything about the Aduran conquest of other species, then they may as well just pack up and not bother.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and then what do you think of the Aduran reasons for the war?
Ooh, I don't know. Sorry, I've got a cat climbing on me. Well, I mean, they just seem like they're, like, war-hardy.
Yeah. Yeah, and also very poor intelligence, and they never realised what they're actually getting themselves into.
Yeah.
And thinking that they had a no-lose scenario when what they actually had was a no-win scenario. What did we get to the Homondans in this bit? Oh, no. So we get the reasons, and then we get the brief depiction of the war. And I do like how they make it. It really expands the view here. Like, this thing was going on much longer than we had any sense of, and it had more players than we had a sense of. And in particularly the Homonda, the other giant lizards, who'd sort of backed the Adurans. And we'd had no...
They sound kind of cool.
We'd had no sense of them in the book. And it reminded me of the way when you read Korean accounts of the Korean War, even Vietnamese accounts of the Vietnam War, the Americans don't really exist in it. It's all, the North v South fighting each other, and the Americans are really a very distant presence in those, and similarly the Mondans just don't figure in the on-the-ground narrative here, even though they were largely responsible for this war happening at all.
I mean, I can understand... Yeah, I mean, maybe not. So I could see that for the Koreans, maybe not so much for the Vietnamese. I mean, it would have been It's a small moment in the long history of the war, but for the Vietnam War, the Americans came in and just completely annihilated that country.
But I mean, I'm particularly thinking of the book called Novel Without a Name, which was written by a woman who'd commanded North Vietnamese troops in the war, and her book has no Americans in it whatsoever. She's just fighting South Vietnamese.
Yeah. But when they come in, they, napalm the shit out of it.
Oh, yeah, she talks about being napalmed, but that's bombs falling from the sky. There's no... that's like an act of God or the weather.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting.
Anyway,
I fight, personally, this kind of, war narrative is not really my bag. I'm more about the people and the characters.
Yes.
Which is why in my summary I said it was boring. I mean, it wasn't boring, but it's just not, really my thing.
Yep. Okay.
But that's cool. There's something in here for everyone.
Yes. I did like how it describes the very end of the war, saying Idir, that's where the Adurans come from, was never attacked and technically never surrendered. Its computer network was taken over by effector weapons and, freed of designed-in limitations, upgraded itself to sentience to become a culture mind in all but name. So I just love the idea of a culture ship sneaking in and bootstrapping the Aduran computers to full sentience, and then them saying, war's over.
I like it. I mean, it's interesting in the statistics that they include machines in the casualties.
Yes, well, they have to when it's a culture history.
Yeah.
I also, I mean, it's just a nice piece of storytelling where you've got the statistics, 851.4 billion sentient, lives lost.
They even include ships. I mean, I guess maybe you would, but...
Yeah, and, 91 million ships lost, 14,000 orbitals lost, and we spent a large chunk of this book getting a sense of scale of how colossal orbitals are, right?
There's 6 stars that get lost.
Yeah,
that's massive.
6 stars destroyed, a ring, 3 spheres.
What's a ring?
A ring is, it's much bigger than an orbital, where you put a ring of matter around a star at...
So what's an example of it?
Earth orbit? Well, it's... if you'd read Larry Niven's Ringworld books, that's all based on a Ringworld.
Oh, like a real-world example?
They don't... We've never found one in real life.
Oh, right, okay.
So
what's like the Milky Way?
Sorry? Milky Way's a galaxy.
So how come... So no galaxies got destroyed?
No, it was all within our galaxy. The fire.
Okay.
Although in a second we're going to get to some Magellanic Clouds, but they're very close to our galaxy.
Science.
Yeah, science. But, okay, so you get this colossal numbers, right, but given to us in a way that we can kind of sort of get our heads around, right? Like, nearly 1 trillion lives lost. And then historical perspective. A small, short war that rarely extended through more than 0.02% of the galaxy by volume and 0.01% by stellar population. Rumours persist of far more impressive conflicts stretching through vastly greater amounts of time and space. Nevertheless, the chronicles of the galaxy's elder civilizations rate the Adiran Culture War as the most significant conflict of the past 50,000 years, and one of those singularly interesting events they see so rarely these days. And then we get to what happens to the characters. So
it's like when you like watching a movie and they're like, so went on to live a full life and have 4 children.
Yeah, Secretary General of the United States.
So spent 18 years in prison, died of cancer.
That sort of thing, yeah. I like that Balveda, having gone through everything she went through, just was like, screw you people, I don't think any of this was worth it. Horza was right.
That is the most interesting postscript story out of all of them, because her and Horza's worldview just, they're like, you know, we talked about it in one of, like, I can't remember the last episode or the one before, how they're like actually more similar than different.
Yeah. And
like this was her, like, to me, like Horza would have done maybe something like that. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, Horza was starting to gather doubt about the rightness of his cause as it went on, but Balveda definitely seems to have caught a bit of Horza's religion from him, yeah. So she, had herself put into deep sleep until the culture could statistically prove the war had been morally justified. And I love the idea that millions and millions of people did this and all got woken up at the same time. But
you never actually find out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's implied that they just woke them up and it wasn't statistically justified.
Well, they woke up because they felt it was justified, and that's about 600 years after the war ended.
400 it was, I think.
Was it? Okay.
But
then
you
that
don't
she just
find
went
out.
auto-euthanized herself.
Yeah, because she obviously doesn't believe them.
Or she just was like, well, what's the point? But yeah. Yeah, I think it's fair to say she disagreed with their assessment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Fal never got to meet her. You know, I like that Zoralundra gets, you know, a bit more of what he does during the war.
Zoralundra, actually, I was thinking about... Zoralundra actually isn't in the book very much.
No, but Horza thinks about him a lot.
But he's, like, this imposing character throughout. Like, he's remains, like, this kind of not moral compass, but, like, he's, like, an idealised version for Horza about, like, the Idirans. Like, that's why I'm with them, because of that guy.
I also think that he was just playing Horza the whole time.
Yeah, same, I agree.
Yeah. And was showing Horza a kindlier kind of
version.
Yeah.
Because then with, I've forgotten his name, the one that was in the tunnel with them the whole time.
Quaernal and Zoxal.
Zoxal. Like, Zoxal's, like, to me, like, must be what an Adiran is in reality.
Well, I mean, Zoxal is your special forces Adiran.
Yeah.
So, it's just like, I wouldn't want all Australians to be judged by Ben Roberts-Smith.
True.
You know, but at the same time, an Australian spy handler would, you know, give people quite a different view of what Australia is as they manipulate them. We'll just quick going through the dramatis personae and then talk Scotch, and then we'll get to the final bit. I did like that Jandrel Jelly, the mercenary who was in Craiglan's Free Company, gets a little what happened to him, and I love the description of he expired pleasantly, if not peacefully, in someone else's bed.
Yeah, I like that too.
And then Unaha Closp retiring to build small steam-driven automata as a hobby. I think that's lovely.
Yeah, but after, like, serving the culture and... Yeah. Anyways, he's just such a dork.
Yeah. It's a dork. He was a brave little dork, though. And then Fal's exciting life.
Yeah.
Changed sex several times, bore 2 children, joined Contact after the war, went primitive without permission on a Stage 2 uncontacted world with a tribe of wild horsewomen, slaved for a dirigible hypersage and a block-star airsphere, Returned to the culture for the Joan Jaces Tans Corporation into a group mind. Was caught in an avalanche while climbing but lived to tell the tale. Had another child, then accepted an invitation to join Special Circumstances and spent nearly 100 years as a male emissary to the then recently contacted Million Star Anarchy of Sauvalet. I would say we've touched on this, but it is worth noting that everyone in the culture is essentially transgender.
Yes.
And that puts... I mean, this wasn't the first science fiction to try and normalise transgender, but...
Sorry, I've still got my COVID cough.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really transgender, it's because they can change sex. I mean, transgender people don't want to change sex all the time.
You're not turfing here, are you?
No, the transgender people don't want to change sex all the time. They want to they identify as a particular sex.
Yeah, but we're talking about lives that last many hundreds of years.
It's what do you call amphibians that do that?
Yeah.
You know, what do you call that?
Yeah, okay, I do not... You're right, we do not want to say that transgender people want to have multiple sex changes, so that is...
Yeah, like it's not like they're flip-flopping.
Yeah.
I think you're turfing.
So I thought you were about to say something about Abraham.
No, I'm not a turf.
Okay. All right.
But can I just say something?
Mm-hmm.
If there was a movie,
mm-hmm.
I think Tilda Swinton should play Falnagestra.
Tilda Swinton today or Tilda Swinton 20 years ago?
Whatever.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Like, don't you just, picture her as...
You
can see it,
Fowler's being a bit younger.
Well, yeah, but here she's 4 and 7.
By the end.
Yeah.
Yes, maybe. Yeah, I could see that. I like the description of Sharsworld when the next people finally turn up being like, oh, everything's just been put back exactly the way it was.
I know, everything's gone. No one even knew.
But then the description of the debris and finally some closure to the opening words of the book. Saying that, that all the mess had been dumped near the pole of the planet, far underground, and that in that mess was a book, and the first page of it was, what were the words, Sheridan? The Jinmoti of Boslan 2.
Oh, yeah.
So it was Kira Chell's favourite book that Horza had as his shape-shifting mantra.
Right. Yeah, I didn't pick that up.
I'm a bit sad that there's no more Yeltsin memory in this whole thing.
Yeah, I agree, but I mean, how can you can't have a postscript if she's dead.
Yeah, I guess so. Someone could have remembered it in some way, but I guess, that's it. Some people never get remembered.
No one else that died on the company gets remembered.
Yeah, true. Okay, and then we're told that the mind had no memory until it was repaired on another General Systems vehicle. Following its rescue by Belveda, and then it was installed in a big ocean-class GSV, survived the war, taking part in many important space battles.
So if it has no memory, though, why does it call itself Horza?
We'll get to talking about that. Also, it might have lied.
Well, yeah, okay, we can talk about that.
And then just... it broke my heart the way this was written, but I think that's part of the cleverness of it. Just the end of this chapter, one line. What does it say, Sheridan?
The changes were wiped out as a species during the final stages of the war in space.
So not only is Horza dead and...
His whole species is like a footnote.
Yeah, and a dead footnote.
Yeah.
Now... The whiskey we're drinking, you brought back the Lafrogue 4 barrels, which has been aged in 4 different oak barrels. And it's an Isla malt, so it's from the Isle of Isla, so it is a smoky, salty bugger, because that's the Isla style. Ian M. Banks' favourite style, I believe. So well done on that. Now
I did get to go to the duty-free shop.
Yes. Now, the oak is doing what it's supposed to and providing lots of vanilla notes into the smoky saltiness, which is quite something, actually. And
it's very tasty.
They say it's got buttery flavours, and I would actually agree with that.
It's very smooth.
Yep. Loses a little bit of the raw, raging, smoky fire that I normally associate with Isla malts, but as a drink, it's a pleasant thing, yeah.
Yeah, because I took a little taster earlier in the podcast, and I was a bit worried that I was going to be like and give away the game that I'd had a sample. But yeah, it's very, very smooth, and I'm not the whiskey drinker, as our listeners may know.
Well, you're going to be by the end of this.
The only time I drink whiskey is on this podcast, or if someone offers it to me and I'm very drunk and have nothing else to drink, which anyway, I don't usually remember.
It is in no way a cheap bottle.
It's not the most expensive.
No.
You know what's making me like... So just having gone to the duty-free shop, where you're presented with an array of... I feel like when you're in duty-free, it's like... There's no, like, bottom level, really. Like, they really, like, cut out... Oh, actually, I think the Johnny Walkers were there, but they're on the separate... The Johnny Walker gets its own stand.
It's determinedly mid-range, I would say, in a duty-free store.
Yeah, so you get mid and above. Yeah. And I saw those...
But it's all affluence brands, but not necessarily high quality.
I saw all those, like the bottles that are, like... They were 500 Fijian dollars, which would be, like, what, like, $350 Australian.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, I know there's whiskey a lot more expensive than that, but like, I wonder what a $350 bottle of whiskey tastes like if this $100 bottle of whiskey or $120 bottle of whiskey tastes like this. Must be really nice.
Yeah, I mean, I have drunk a few very expensive ones, not by the bottle, just by the glass.
Or is it like wine where, to me, like, I mean, I've had a Penfolds Grange 60s, which is like a few $1,000s. Was a very long time ago. I was very young.
Yeah.
But I think, to me, once you get over the $50 mark...
We're talking about wine bottles now.
Wine bottles. You probably like...
The quality is very hard to discern the difference.
Yeah, like I don't... Like, what's the economic term for that where...
Elasticity.
Like, no. The reward for the extra cost is not as significant as you get from moving from a $10 bottle to a $30 bottle.
Yeah, what you can get is just... with some very unusual flavours, like the most expensive whiskies are stuff from distilleries that burned down 50 years ago and they've kept the barrels aging. And then it's really just novelty is what you're paying for.
Yeah, which is to me what you pay for with a $400 bottle of wine. Like you would pay for scarcity, like that's what you're paying for, right?
Yeah, but with the scarcity comes the novelty if it's worth that. Anyway, a damn fine drop of scotch. So
anyway, maybe we should get on Patreon and maybe someone can get us a $350 bottle.
Yeah, let's build the audience a little more before we start asking for the Patreons. Then they'll all be saying, when's Sheridan going to finish the chapter?
Oh God, yeah, there'll be more expectation. I should just buy myself a $350 bottle of scotch.
Yeah, probably easier. Okay, now let's get on to the final words of this book. Do you want to walk us through what happens in the epilogue, Sheridan?
Oh, I mean, I can, but you might be better at it. Basically, we're introduced to a character called Gimmershim Falk, who is he's very immediately introduced to the reader.
Yeah.
As being Balvader's great grandniece.
There's a lot of very compact character description here. So it starts with Gimmershim Falk, breathless.
Pregnant? Oh, you're breathless?
Breathless, late as usual. So that tells you a lot about a character, right?
Yeah.
Sizably pregnant, mentions that she's distantly related to Balvader.
As well as a budding poet.
Yep, there we go. Arrived on board the General Systems vehicle an hour after the rest of her family, that's significant lateness when the family's just left you behind.
Left the pregnant lady.
Now, here it mentions the vehicle had picked them up from the remote planet in the Greater Cloud where they'd been holidaying. So this is a little bit of our galactic neighbourhood. The Magellanic Clouds are different small galaxies that are quite close to ours.
Yeah.
You can see them in the night sky, but they just appear as smudges if you don't look directly at them. And it needs to be a very, very clear night, very clear cold night. I have seen the Magellanic Clouds when I've been camping, but you wouldn't see them from the street normally. Anyway, so that's so they're describing. He's hinting now that he's saying now that at this point in the future, the culture's expanded beyond our galaxy and has started to reach nearby galaxies.
Right.
Which is quite a big deal. It means they've probably filled up the whole of this galaxy before they've started doing that. And then shows she's met the new ship, and they're on their way to meet up with another ship, the Determinus, which is going to take them all the way back to our galaxy. And then she starts talking to the drone.
And the drone says, I am Borohoza Gorbachev. So it says the ship said through the drone.
Yes. So it was a remote control drone. So on these things, the ship's mind has manifests itself in drones all over the ship to talk to people it wants to talk to.
And then she says, that's a weird name, which I guess because there's no more changes left, so whatever dialect, linguistic signs there are. And then the drone says, and she says, how did you get that? And it says, it's a long story. And she says, I like long stories. Yeah.
Okay, so...
I feel like now I know why there's 10 books. I feel like that was forewarning.
So what we got through that very indirect piece of storytelling, and I don't think when I read this when I was in my 20s, I actually picked this up. I think I missed that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think...
We seem to miss a lot. Yeah. Characters dying. Or anyway, not dying.
So let's talk about the mind.
So if the mind has forgotten all of what happened on Shah's world, and it's named Borohoza Gorbachev.
It's named itself after Horza.
But how do you know it named himself?
What do you mean?
Someone else could have named him that.
No, it clearly said that he'd chosen it. In the epilogue bit, it mentioned that he had a... here we go. Modified, it was subsequently replaced into a range class GSV, taking its slightly unusual chosen name with it.
Oh, yeah, no, you're right. I do recall that.
Yeah.
But then, why would it do that if it has no memory of Horza?
I've got some thoughts on that.
Well, it could be the culture appropriating the history of the changes.
It could, but I'm going to insert some headcanon and supposition in here. We know it's a very open society. So I would say that the first thing the mind would have done once it was reinstated would be to look up what the culture had been thinking about it while it was missing and its own history of its birth to being recovered. So it would have had Balvader's records and logs.
Mm.
It also would have had access to the data which we saw with Fal's stuff earlier in the book, where the whole culture is like, why doesn't the damn thing just terminate itself and then we don't have to worry about it being captured? That would be quite confronting to know that your own side just really wished you just killed yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. And it would have had all of Balvader's thoughts on Horza. And by naming itself after Horza, it's saying, I too have doubts about this war and about what the culture's been doing.
Or it could just be naming itself after the being that saved him, because essentially...
How did Horza save him?
We went to Shah's world to rescue it.
Well, he went to Shah's world to capture it for the Adherents.
Yeah, but how do you know that...
Well, he knows that because that's in Balvader.
But like maybe it's like, well, for whatever reason this changer came, it ended up being the reason I was saved.
Yeah, I guess so, because he brought Balvader. I think, and this is all supposition, and anyone can insert what they think it is here. I think it is the mind saying that Horza had a point, and he wants to remind people of that point about all the doubts Horza had about the culture. Because particularly from in Banks's point of view, the way this book is written, starting with Horza's highly antagonistic view of the culture, it's all about saying, hang on, there's this thing that we're going to spend a bunch more books idolising, but let's remember there are doubts about it, and also remember it's this whole imperial project of intervention. Let's put on the table right now that maybe it's not a good idea after all.
I mean, that's what I initially thought as well, but then it's just the fact that he doesn't remember what happens on Shah's world. His interpretation of Horza is an interpretation of history through another person's eyes, or people's eyes. Mm-hmm. And so you don't know what bias has been brought into that.
True, but I mean, the mind would have had access to a lot of information. It would have known all about...
yeah, I mean, like, I'm someone who works in the cultural sector and, everything is tainted.
Yes, absolutely. But, this mind's got an intellect bigger than God's. And and it has for whatever reason. And remember as well, all that stuff about Horsa being like, what's my name? I can't remember my name. And then this thing that's going to essentially live forever deciding to...
Well, I do find that interesting because the whole book, he has this obsession with his name, and then you add in that, layer of Yalsyn getting pregnant.
Mm-hmm. Something to carry him on.
Carry the name on and yada yada. And, he's, obviously, worried for a period about his own, legacy and things like that.
Yeah.
And then his enemy essentially takes his name.
I feel it was done as a tribute.
I don't know. I thought that initially too.
Mm-hmm.
But I've started to, the more I thought about it and when I reread the chapters, I just started to think that it wasn't, potentially so nice.
Mm.
I don't know what he would felt about that.
No, he probably wouldn't have been a super fan.
Don't think he would have liked it. I don't think Balvader would have liked it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it gets you thinking. Gets you chatting.
It's got something to talk about.
It does.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else you want to say about this book now that we've got to the end?
Well, I mean, the whole time I have really enjoyed that setup of something as in a sense, a name is quite trivial. It's just a word.
Mm-hmm.
But it really makes you think about its importance. And it has been set up throughout the entire book, and I did really enjoy that. It made me think about my own name and...
Yep. No, the whole book is set up for that twist right at the very end. Yeah. Yeah. But, okay, let's step back for a second from this chapter. We're at the end of the book. Next episode, we're going to start the Player of Games. This is your first culture book. It's done. Tell us what you thought.
Oh, wow, that's a big question.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I must say, in some ways I'm glad you told me that incorrectly Horsa had died, because that led to the conversation that we had about what's going to be in the next book, and you told me, well, none of these people are in there. And I, genuinely, the last bit of the book, I was really I teared up multiple times because I was like, I'm never seeing these characters again. I think if I opened the next book, not knowing that, I would have been pretty pissed off.
Right, you'd have been like, where's Balvader?
Or I would have gotten to chapter 3 and be like, none of these people seem to be coming back. Who are these new dudes? So I feel I feel sad about leaving these characters.
Okay. I mean, most of them we left dead in the train station.
Most of them. And, there's definitely most of the characters were you just cannon fodder.
Yeah.
But, I'm really sad about leaving Balvader and Horsa.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Interesting.
So I'm quite interested in and I guess what, when I said the stuff about the history of the Idirians, I read books more for the characters.
Yeah.
So I don't really read books for the worlds. The things that I've always liked about sci-fi is not the worlds that are created. It is the character narrative. So I'm a little sad about that. I probably would like to have had characters continue through. But, it's an exciting journey. I'm reading a type of book I probably wouldn't really usually read.
Okay. All right. Yeah, certainly, I mean, he went to a great deal of effort to tie up all the loose threads from the story in those...
It was actually a satisfying conclusion. Mm-hmm. You find out about every single person you cared about.
Yeah.
Even Zora Lundra, you're like, cool, narrative shut.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is there really no one that appears?
Do you want a little spoiler?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Oh, what about the big fat guy on the Eaters?
He got blown up when the orbital got blown up.
There's no more of them?
There's lots of...
I kind of want a whole book on those people. Because that was messed up.
You're going to have to write that one. Because
I
Andy Banks isn't with us anymore.
That was the most memorable chapter in
Yes, everyone thinks The Eaters is the most memorable chapter. Yeah. And also, literally Ian M. Banks was asked once what's considered Phlebas about, and his answer was...
He said The Eaters?
No, he said it's about a dude who gets shipwrecked.
Oh, right.
Now, it's actually multi-layered because Hawes are being shipwrecked on that island, but also the mind getting shipwrecked on Charles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know what? Like, I've really avoided the internet.
Yeah.
With this, just to avoid spoilers and stuff, but occasionally, like, I will Google something to, like, remember someone's name or, and I haven't seen, like, a lot come up about it. Like, is there a lot written about the books? There doesn't seem to be, like, heaps of fan fiction or fan pages or...
There's a significant wikia.
Yeah, right.
And on Quora, there's quite heated debates about bits and pieces. I think there's some Reddits.
Yeah, but Star Wars, like, obviously it's the extreme end of the spectrum, but... Like, there's like no dedicated web pages or, like...
Well, yeah, the wikias are dedicated pages to talking about things.
I haven't seen, like, people creating images and, like...
There's a bit of that out there.
Okay. I probably haven't looked hard enough because I've been really trying to avoid it.
I would say the fact that the culture's only ever lived as books has limited its wider impact.
But, like, what's that...
But the books have sold in their millions.
What's those books, like, Terry Pratchett Ringworld books? They've only ever existed. Discworld,
yes.
Sorry.
Discworld has had a couple of BBC television adaptations. I wouldn't say they're very good.
There's a lot of nerds writing a lot of stuff about that.
Yeah.
I've never read them.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong, I think I've bought every book Terry Pratchett's ever written, but I'd also say they're just very different beasts the culture's also...
I guess Discworld, like, a lot of adolescents get into it.
Yeah, the culture's just harder.
A harder read.
It's harder in every way. The culture is harder. The things the culture does are harder. There are less happy endings.
This actually, was a really sad ending. Yeah. It was a really depressing book.
Yeah.
Literally everyone dies.
Yeah. Yeah. The drones keep still building their steam engines somewhere.
They're not people.
He's a person. God, now someone's getting speciesist. Okay. Anyway, is there things we haven't talked about that you want to get off your chest, or shall we adjourn this at this point and start up the player games next time we're back?
Yeah, I actually have already started it, but I haven't.
Have you now?
I only got like 3 pages through though.
Okay. All right. Well, we will have a lot to talk about then. Okay, folks. So thank you so much for listening to us. We hope you've enjoyed it. I'm gonna assume that if you've made it this far, you are enjoying what the fuck we're doing. So, excuse my language. That's good. And we will keep doing more. So keep listening. Thanks very much, folks.
Thanks, everyone.